really excited now to have these two guys talking. Chico, I don't know what to expect, but it's going to be quite a great time we're going to have. So I'm gonna hand the mic over to you two, and you're on, guys. You're on.
But I see that jersey behind you, and isn't it interesting? That's number 33. And I just checked, and in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan this morning, it is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is Celsius, but it's very cold. And it says that on a cool July day, Glen Resch was born in that town. But my question for Chico is, how long did you stay in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan?
Well, I wasn't making any of the decisions, Doc, but my dad got a great job in a meatpacking house in Regina. So we moved there when I was 3.
To the big city. And now, would you have become a goalie before you moved to Regina, or did you take up goal after you got there?
Well, Doc, it's interesting. And I'll just say this, just to cover everything that I've been thinking about. When I was young, I didn't think much, and but it was more fun being young in some ways than being old. And when we get old like we are, and I see a lot of guys, Jarvie, I was very impressed. I cannot believe you didn't score 40 goals. You did that devotional without glasses. I see on you.
I'm not saying I don't need them.
But you know what? Like I think one of the greatest things about getting old is you now look back on your experiences and the situations you were in. And at the time, you didn't realize that God's hand was involved. But now you look back and you think, oh, that was divine intervention. That was divine intervention. Oh, Jesus was there for that. And I didn't know it. And so, Doc, to answer your question, growing up, everybody's wired differently. Some of these guys that are on the Zoom have always, probably since they were 5 years old, been confident and comfortable in groups and so forth. But others were very shy and uncertain of themselves. And I was one of those guys. I just really didn't want to be involved in anything. And so I loved hockey, but I never even learned to skate. And then when I was 8 years old, I would go over to the outdoor rink, and most people remember those if you grew up in the 50s, that the outdoor rink was where you spent a lot of your time. And I would stand on a snowbank and just watch and wait till the two leagues, the Might Bs and the Might As, played their game. And as you can imagine, it was very cold. But I would just, slug home afterwards. I would look down the way and see the shack. And we called it the shack in Regina. A warming house, I think, is the name they use now. But it was the shack. And I knew this guy, Jack, who because he would say hi to me sometimes, and he shoveled the ice and watered it. He was Jack the Shack Man. Anyway, after about 3 weeks or a month standing there, I heard someone yelling at me down the corner of the rink by the shack, and I looked, and it was Jack. And I was very nervous, but he kept motioning for me to come there. So I walked over there, and Jack said to me, and I'll never forget this, he says, "Listen, young man, you've been standing here being an observer. Do you want to play? Like, the one goalie for the Might B team didn't show up, and would you like to be the goalie?" And guys, he kind of gave me the gospel, although I didn't really hear it from Jesus for 25 years. But I said, "But Jack, I got nothing. I don't have skates, obviously no mask, no equipment, no cup, anything." I said, I don't have really, I was thinking I don't have much to offer. He says, "That's okay." He says, "I'll take you into the shack and I'll strap the equipment on you." And he said, "But here's what I'm going to say to you." And this was the grace. He said, "Look, the rest of this year, you can play in your rubber boots," because I couldn't skate. He said, "But in the meantime, you've got to learn to skate. So when you come back next year, you have to be a goalie with skates on." And I thought, oh my, what a graceful thing to say, that he would be understanding. And so anyway, I went in, he put the gear on me, shoved me out on the ice, and I played my first game and fell in love with it that afternoon, that cold afternoon in Regina on the outdoor rink. Doc? Did we lose him?
Doc?
Yeah, I think we did.
Chico? Chico?
Yes.
What would Doc ask you next?
Then we just talked about, the dreams, and like I couldn't make the Regina Pat, so I decided to go to college. And because my mom, I love moms that know more than their sons, and she won't take no for an answer. She said, "You're not going to make the Regina Pats. You're going to be 19, and you still can't hardly make junior B. You go get an education." And my college years, they weren't very impressive. Again, I was just an average goalie, but Montreal owned my rights, and I got invited to go to the Montreal Canadiens training camp. Are you back, Doc?
And now, when you went to the Montreal Canadiens training camp, did you think, since I'm back on, and you have done a wonderful job of penalty killing my obvious embarrassment away, when you went to Montreal's training camp, did you have ambitions of say, the big club?
Oh, absolutely not, Doc. I mean, I was wanting to get autographs, and I thought I had a good camp. They had Dougie Jarvis, and anybody who really was familiar with the Canadiens. They had who was the director of player personnel? He only had one eye, Jarvie. Claude Ruel.
Oh, Claude Ruel?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Paul. So, I'm thinking I'm having a good training camp. And Friday, he says, "Hey, come on up to my office. I want to talk to you." And so I get in there, and he says really nice things about me. You guys have all heard this speech, but he says, "But you know what? You're not really ready. We're going to send you to Muskegon." Now, Muskegon was the lowest minor leagues, you guys. That was like saying, "Look, your career's basically over, but if you want to play a couple years and make $250 a week, you can go to Muskegon." And I remember I started, and I had never done this, but I said, "Claude, have you been watching me? I've had a really good camp. Could I just maybe try out for the Voyageurs?" They were the American League, and I'm kind of going on, and he puts his hand up. He says, "Glenn," that's who I was then. He says, "Listen, I know this is hard for you to take, but I am telling you the truth. If this is not the truth, may the good Lord take my only good eye." And I thought, okay, end the conversation. I can't cause Claude to lose his only good eye. And then the conversation was over. I believed him, and I went to Muskie.
You mentioned $250. Was that did you have any idea that you would play for that little amount of money?
No, as a matter of fact, Jerry DeLeese was, one of the top IHL guys. And he started out by offering me $175, and I told him I got to have at least $250. I didn't know what I was saying, and I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Anyway, he did finally agree to that, Doc, but I know it always bothered him that I had gotten the advantage in the negotiations of getting $50 more than he thought I was worth. So it was an albatross around my neck that whole year because of that.
Was there anything that was an advantage in your having spent 1 year in Muskegon? I remember spending 4 years in the International League in Port Huron, and among the advantages that I had was not only a lot of games of experience, but I met my wife there. We've been married 44 years, and she wasn't thrown into the shower or anything like that. We met at a church function, but it was a valuable time that I spent in Port Huron. Was there anything valuable about the 1 year in Muskegon?
Well, there were many things. We had a great team, and we won the championship. And a couple things. Obviously, I wasn't a believer, and I didn't mention that when I was a little kid growing up in Regina and so forth, there was no spiritual influence in my life. There was twice I thought of God. One time when I was 12 years old, laying in my bed at the north end of Regina, thinking like, who am I? Like, what am I doing here? Is there anybody up there listening? And that was the only little snippet of spirituality that I could ever remember. And then when I was 17, I was laying in the back of my 49 DeSoto, drunk, I might add, because I wasn't going to go home and get in trouble with mom and dad. And again, I laid in the back seat and looking up at that big ceiling, and I felt that there was a presence. And again, I had no instruction in anything spiritual, so I thought, like, something up there, or God, I mean, I knew the name God. God, are you real? Or, is there more to this than just what I've been doing for my 17 years? So when I went to Muskegon, this guy, Don Lismer, was there. And we loved Don. He was a goal scorer, not much of a back checker, you guys, but he was a goal scorer. He played on the top line, but he had a presence and a calmness about him, much like Laurie Boschman talks about, Ron Ellis. This guy wasn't the typical hockey player. Like, why is he not going out after practice? Why is not he going to the bars? They said, well, watch out for him. He's a Christian guy. And I didn't know what that meant. But I did watch him, and I was pretty impressed. And then he invited us, Doc, to hear some Christian speakers, which was a very interesting, life-changing experience for me as well.
Couple of playoff runs I want to ask you about, because I do love history. And while I was still in the IHL, our coach in Port Huron, Bob McCammon, invited me to his house to watch Game 7 of the 75 playoffs between Pittsburgh and the Islanders, being televised on Hockey Night in Canada, because we're a border town here. And a former IHL guy that he used to shoot against when he played for Port Huron, Glenn Resch, had come in for Billy Smith after the third game and the first 3 losses by the Islanders, and had won the next 3. And in the 58-year history at that time of the NHL, no rookie goalie had ever won a Game 7 with a shutout, but you did. We watched that together. What do you remember about the 1-0 win, and about that Islanders run, and about yourself that year?
Well, Doc, I was as surprised as anyone that I accomplished this. Remember, I didn't have a background of having been a great goalie, but I was lucky. Pucks were hitting the post. I remember Jean Pronovo. He had 2 chances in Game 7. One he dung off the middle of my head. I went down early. Another one he hit the post. Again, not a believer, but you know how we are as hockey players, superstitious. And then, of course, you'd pray and say to whoever you're praying, just be with me and help me to accomplish this. And so when we won 1-0 in the 4th game, I really, honestly, and I mean this sincerely, I couldn't believe that I was part of that. And the only good thing was, for me, I think it established to hockey people that, maybe this kid has something, because I only played 25 games. And I was never a great goalie, but I was a good average goalie. But I think that first bit of success, if you will, really helped people give me another chance. And then it was 13 years later that I finally retired. But it was very instrumental. And Doc, every player remembers. I know Jarv said, Toe said, hey, you haven't won anything yet. And that was kind of true, because we never did win the Stanley Cup that year. But for many of us, that was our first real shot of confidence. And then the bulk of that team later won the Stanley Cup in 1980.
Yeah, and you and Billy Smith were together at that time. So what do you remember about that first championship?
Well, it was very instrumental, because, I thought my life was built around being a hockey player. And when you play in New York and you're having success, you get a lot of accolades and people chanting your name, and, you get puffed up with yourself. And I thought, I'm pretty good, and I had a great season. But a turning point, a divine intervention was going to occur, because we started the season and playoffs, and there's a first time Al Arbor, great coach, greatest coach ever, I think, said, listen, guys, I know I've been splitting you in playoffs, but we got to get it together this year, and whichever goalie's hot gets to keep playing. Well, I played the first game and played average, and we lost. And so Smitty got to play the next game, and Smitty won. And then we went to, on the road, he won, and he won. And then we went the next round, he won, and he won. And because my whole self-worth and everything I dreamed of was tied up in hockey, I thought, well, you're a loser. You're not even being part of this. I played a few games. I think I played like 3 or 4 games in the whole playoffs, but it really crushed my foundation of why I was living my life. And I got to tell you guys, I remember on the bench, Long Island, almost in tears, saying again to the God I really didn't know, why is this happening? What am I going to do next? I'm 32. This is everything. And I remember because Donnie Lismer had invited me to this speaker who was a chaplain from the Dallas Cowboys, who just challenged us as hockey players. He says, you guys think you guys are also tough. I'll give you a tough assignment. Do you have the courage just to find out who Jesus Christ is? Just to find out. And it was like, oh, wow. And that was my first challenge of faith. But this is nowhere like us. I remember sitting on the bench, and it was like Jesus was saying to me, hey, you remember you met me, about 7 years ago in Muskegon, and you kind of gone off on your own way. He said, I'm still here. And he said, and this was the feeling I had, guys. If you commit your life to me, I will turn this greatest defeat into your greatest victory. And I went home and I thought, wow. And then as timing is and divine intervention happens, Doc, I get a letter from Donnie Lismer inviting me to a professional athletes outreach conference, which was a Christian-based organization, and invited me. And I was very nervous. I said to my wife, Diane, you want to go? She said, well, what do you got? I was drinking a lot. I was just totally unhappy, no inner peace. I was losing a purpose in my life. And Doc, I went to that conference, and that was where I gave my life to Christ.
Wow. So what does faith in Christ give you? Everyone in the room has an answer to that, which may be similar and may be different. But what does faith in Christ give you?
Well, Doc, I think for all of us, if there's not a need, if there's not an emptiness, I don't think, this is just me now, I'm not saying everybody agrees with me, but I don't know that people come to Christ intellectually. I just haven't seen that kind of depth of commitment if it's just an intellectual. So for me, it gives me a peace and a purpose, but mostly what happened was when I was in that Marriott in Phoenix, I remember I kept hearing, if I want to be anybody on this Zoom's friend, I've got to make a commitment to them. And I'm going to be your friend. I want to be your friend. And they're going to say the same thing to me in different ways. So I remember I kept hearing that, oh, you got to make this commitment. Got to get on your knees. And I went back, and Diane, my wife's sitting in the corner, and guys, I'm looking down at that floor, and I'm thinking, you coward, can you do this? And I'm thinking, no, I don't want to do this. Can you do this? You have to do this. And so I quickly thought, well, what do you got to lose? You got nothing. Your foundation in hockey is blown up. You've never had inner peace and purpose in your life beyond just being a hockey player or striving for worldly goals. You can do this. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to do it. But here's what I knew. When I got off my knees, one of two things was going to happen. Either Jesus was going to be real, or I was going to be in a worse place, because I was hoping he was real, but if he wasn't, then I would be crushed. So I hit the floor, and I remember praying the prayer that I heard about, and I just remember saying to Jesus, listen, I don't know what it means to be a Christian. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, and I don't know if I got the right stuff for it. But just like I said, when Jack the Shack Man had invited me, I said, I'll give you all I got. I don't know what that means, what that is. But I said to him, guys, this is what really changed my life. I said, Jesus, if you're really up there, could you do me one favor? Could you now sprinkle some peace that I've never experienced in my life since I was a little boy? Could you sprinkle some peace on me? And I get chills right now because I'm on my knees, you guys, and I feel this supernatural peace coming down over me. And I felt that anxiety and all that turmoil in my heart and just left. And I just remember thinking, Jesus, you're really up there. You're really there. You really are who you say you are. And so that was the life-changing experience for me, Doc. And I think because of that, as a team player, and I know you're a team player, Doc, the second part of it is it's not just about us. You know, a hockey player develops his skill, but if he doesn't become a good team player and share some of that with teammates, really, where's his fruit? What's he doing? So I think that's what it's done, Doc. It's just helped me to understand that I have teammates, and we have to sharpen each other and be involved. And the last thing is, Doc, you told me one time, Doc, you know, was one of the greats, right? And I was nervous working with him when I got the job. And Barry Melrose knows that, the Doc, he's worked with him, and, you know, Doc's in a class himself. But Doc, you might not remember. So you said to me, Chico, I want to tell you one thing. I don't know if you're going to come with the best stuff. I don't know how much homework you're going to do necessarily. I want you to try to get as much information as you can. But you know, like in life, you're going to have good days, bad days. You know, it's going to be up and down. But we are going to be listened to by thousands and thousands of people. He says, all I'm asking you is to come with enthusiasm. I remember you said that, Doc. I'm not asking you about performance and doing all the other stuff, but you can be enthusiastic. And I ask that you bring that. And that was the greatest bit of advice I had. He says, even if it's a dump in, if it's a line change and you're going to describe it, be excited about it. And I think it's the same thing for me, Doc, in my life. Jesus is saying, look, you're going to have your ups and downs. Some of you understand the Bible more than others. You know, some of you seem to be deeper in your roots and in your fruit, as Jarvie talked about. But all of you can show the world joy, you know, and it's hard because some days it's not a joyful day. But I find that is the one thing that Christians can do. And I'm rambling here, but I just want to say one more thing. When I think of Laurie Boschman goes to Toronto. He's a young kid, and he's got the world at his fingertips. Now, Laurie Boschman could have been influenced by some of the veterans, the popularity, the money, the accolades. I'm a Maple Leaf. But what stopped him in his tracks? What caused him, and Laurie didn't have a spiritual upbringing either, Ron Ellis's quiet, confident, purposeful life that Bosch looked at and said, wow, that's what I'm missing. That's what I want to accomplish. So I think for all of us, I'm just encouraging you guys, you can all show joy. You can say hello to someone. You can encourage someone. You know, you don't have to go like be their best friend. But as Christians, oh boy, I'm really going. Because I want to ask you one thing now. In this world, what impact can Christians have in a big sense? We know how crazy it is. Well, it can be our attitude. It can be joy. And it can be telling people how Jesus changed our life, how he's inspired us, not how we've done it, but he does it. And then you leave it to the Holy Spirit. And that's my gospel message for today. And how about you, Doc? Doc, I want to know, you had to weave your way through a lot of situations where a lot of different people, but how were you able to show that spirit, that wonderful Christ-like spirit in your job?
I hesitate to say one word more, despite your invitation, only because I really recognize eloquence and sincerity when I hear it. And boy, have you ever said it all this morning. I will try to fabricate a couple of paragraphs to close with, but this was a magnificent expression of your life. When I was around the Devils and you were around the Devils, we had a beat writer named Cara Yorio, who once said, while we were waiting for yet another flight, that man is the most consistently positive person I have ever seen in my life. and she was talking about you. And the reason that she said that was the outflowing of your personality. Some of it is natural and what you have always had since you were a little guy, but the rest of it is just Christ within you. Yes, we've all had our own stories. And I recall spending 3 years in the American League in Portland, Maine. We had a team that, as Barry Melrose will recall, watching the American League at that time, as well as the NHL, could best be described as 6 really good scoring forwards, a couple of very skilled defensemen, and a delightful group of thugs. And we ran rife through the American Hockey League and got letters in the mail from the president, Jack Butterfield, about every other week with various fines that we had incurred. But we had a guy on that team who not only typified the ability to score, but also the ability to scrap. And he also went to church on Sunday. And I asked him once, I said, do you ever get in discussions with your teammates about all of this? And he said, they don't want to hear it. They want to see it. That right winger's name was John Paddock, and I never forgot what he said. And I think it's the very same thing that people have seen in your life, Chico, and what I hope that they can see in the lives of others on this call. And on those days when I am better than on the other days, and we all have those days when maybe our strength isn't as good as others, I hope that there is some semblance of that in me, because Christ does love us all. God does bless us all. There are days that are easier to see and feel it than others, especially when sometimes you get out of bed and you hurt various places. You forget until you take your first couple of breaths that, yes, Christ is within us all and God loves us all. We are very fortunate to know one another. We are very fortunate to be in this world, despite the fact that it is a divisive world these days. But we can be an influence for good, even with a smile on our face and with Christ in our hearts. Other people will see, gee, they're strange. And by being a little bit strange, maybe they'll be curious, and maybe that's the influence we can have. But Chico, you're just magnificent as usual, and it is a pleasure to know you yet again. And I thank you, Mr. Lismer, for this time, and I thank your wonderful bride for sending me the In Touch magazine through the traditional archaic mail system. It arrives before the end of the month, every month, and I refer to it every morning, and I thank you.